Давай. No, 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 I'm okay. I'm okay. Hi. Oh, you can finally feel that winter is gonna add at some point in the future. It's sunny, the sky is blue, and I had to travel quite a long way from here to get my computer for this live. So yeah. What is the book about? Why the T-shirt? Why does it look like that? We need more info. Unboxing. Okay. I can hear you.
Is not connected. Yeah, now there is sound. All over again. Sorry about that.
Well, hi. Well, hi there.
Hi there. Yeah, Violetta Liska or Liska, I'm not sure. On Facebook also wrote us that they cannot hear us. Sorry about that. Well, um, start from the beginning. I've been jumping with this T-shirt over here. I'm very sorry. The streaming software glitched. But once again, hi there. Nice to see you. Dave Turnbull on YouTube is in the comments. Violetta Liska is on Facebook. Maybe somebody else. If there is somebody else there, please leave some comments. Tell us from where you joined us today, and it would be really nice to know about that. And well, as usual, I invite you to subscribe to our channel on YouTube, our page on Facebook, not to miss future updates and podcasts. And maybe you can join our Patreon crowd, well, on Patreon, the crowd of our patrons, and because the money we get from them help us to cover expenses on the editing of the videos of our podcasts, and that's really important for us. So anyway, moving forward, yeah, we have several topics to discuss today. We have some news from iBookBinding, and also I've been jumping and showing this T-shirt and then some other stuff that I got from the London Center for Book Arts. They had a Kickstarter campaign to collect some money, to get some money for renovations of their studio. And well, it was successful, and they sent some stuff to us. Well, the main thing was this book, which is a collection of different bookbinding projects and some beautiful bookbinding and bookmaking, I guess, projects, and some beautiful photos and objects and all that stuff. And you can find the book on the website of the London Center for Book Arts, and I definitely recommend you to go there, because they also have a really nice tutorial, which I also have, and which was a part of their previous Kickstarter campaign. But this time, yeah, they got some money, and I chose to pledge with the book on this amazing T-shirt. And here's the T-shirt.
And what do you think it symbolizes? That they are back from the dead?
They weren't really dead. Well, I guess the some of the things were suspended during the lockdowns and stuff. But I'm not sure if this stuff is directly related. Well, I had to check probably first before showing it. But yeah, we can interpret it in any way we want. So anyway, please check. Mark Okram joined us on Facebook and asks, did he miss anything? I'm not sure at which moment Mark joined us, but probably he missed me
The
speaking
pantomime. It was amazing.
with sound off. So yeah, thanks Violetta. Thank you. Yeah, hopefully there will be no glitches. No more glitches today. That's enough for today. So next thing. Next thing I wanted to show was, and once again, the wrong one, was these new magnetic corner clamps I just designed and added to the shop. And here is the standard magnetic corner clamp. We offer it for, I don't know, a couple of years already, something like that. And it allows to place together two walls of a box you're making, and there are different sizes of them and different angles, so not only 90-degree angle like here, but also 30, 60, 45 degree and 120 degree angles, so you can make all the sorts of different boxes, triangular, hexagonal, rhomboid, or how do you call it? Rhomb-shaped, well, diamond-shaped boxes. So a lot of different stuff, and this is the largest size of the magnet, and it's pretty strong. I used it to fix together two 6mm plates of plexiglass, and well, it's standed together quite nicely. But another thing I wanted to try for quite a long time, I wanted to make a corner clamp that will allow you to hold cardboard, hold the box's corner from three sides. So it needed some bottom part as well besides the walls. And I got a request from a customer recently, and I decided that's a nice opportunity to finally work on the design. And well, here it is. Here is the final thing. And so these three elements are completely not glued together. And then
it's like you are explaining a trick.
And then you can glue them.
Magic.
And they will stay together until they're glued together. And so the request was that if you want, for example, to fix a box, an old box with a damaged corner, you may need a corner clamp like this one, and it will make your work easier probably. We'll see how it goes. We'll see what will be the reaction from the community, and I'm really interested to see some things about this tool, about this version of corner clamp. And this is something I've been thinking about for quite a long time. And yeah, I also wanted to here is a prototype, and I guess it's a nice insight in how the prototyping process worked for me, because initially I printed this purple part, and it appeared to be so I miscalculated and printed two parts of the same height. So you can see the purple parts. So the magnetic level of the outer part was lower than the magnetic level of the inner part, and they didn't work. So then I put a additional green layer to that stuff, and I used some super glue and plastic welding with a 3D pen. And you can probably see the yellow layer between the green and purple. And then I understood that the force is not enough, and I need to add another layer, and then the red layer appeared. And this inner holding thingy also didn't exist in the beginning, so I printed it separately and glued it inside. And that's how this prototype was born. And but then I of course cleaned the design and made this part, which is printed like that, printed together right from the beginning. So I hope besides the person who asked me to work on this design, somebody else will order it, and we'll see some reviews in the nearest future. Yeah, so like that. Pavel, any questions? I usually ask you some tricky questions about my tools.
No, by now I know how this work. The only question is, how didn't you think of it before?
Well, I did think of it before. I thought of it right from the beginning when I made the first versions of when I made these corner clamps. But I just didn't have any time to work on this design. And I know it's like sounds like an excuse, but well, that's what happened.
Okay, I'll trust you on this one.
So, next one, a short announcement, and So let's switch back. A short announcement about the shop. I spoke a bit earlier about our patrons on Patreon and some other ways to support iBookBinding and our project. But yeah, we added a new functionality to our shop. Last time I mentioned that we added a standalone shop at store.ibookbinding.com, which is separate from Etsy, and there are many reasons to try at least slightly move away from Etsy, not to switch off Etsy completely, but to step a bit further away from it. But there is additional functionality in this new shop. There you can add tips to your orders. So if you like our podcast and you like our tools and you want to buy our tools, you can always add some tips, and this money will also go towards our podcast and our YouTube channel, and allow us to make more videos and do more interesting, educational, and fun stuff. So that's an option for you. And now I guess we're ready to move to our main topic. Yeah, are we?
Yeah, so last time we discussed how artists destroy books in ways sometimes thought of as sacrilegious, but we think can be okay if well done, and if no really precious books have been hurt in the process. But today we're talking about a much darker side of the same question: how states um,
Actors.
and other actors are destroying books to suppress ideas, to erase history, and sometimes just to prove a point. And of course, we'll largely talk about things that happened long before we were born, but it's still happening. I mean, anyone who lives in America knows that, and if anyone needed any reminder, there was a news. There was some news
Yeah,
just
quite
recently.
recently. Yeah,
Yeah.
just a couple of weeks ago. So should we switch to the news,
Yeah.
or let's try that? It all broke again. Oh yeah, I know. I know what's the problem. um, I need to work with two mice simultaneously. That's just a bit insane. Let's see.
So the
No,
news
no,
was
nope, didn't work. Didn't work.
still not
Sorry.
working.
Yeah, it should work now.
Here it
Yes,
is.
yeah,
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
Finally. Um, so yeah, Pavel,
Uh, you can talk about. You suggested this topic.
I suggested this topic. Okay, so a pastor of Global Vision Bible Church, Greg Locke, decided to burn some books. So obviously he doesn't like Harry Potter, Twilight series, and some other books as well. And I know about some conflicts about conflicts for some Christian people with Harry Potter books, and I guess Twilight series as well, because there is magic. There are magicians or mages or witches or something like that there, and that goes against their beliefs. And well, we have the same thing happening in Russia as well. There are some Orthodox Christian people who think that Harry Potter is a bad thing, and their children shouldn't read books like that. But this guy decided to go a bit further and made a pyre. So yeah, and I'm not sure that in this article there are no photos of the pyre itself, but you can probably see some examples here. Will it show us? Yeah, so a group of happy people burning some books. And I also was. Uh, it was quite interesting to see that there were some additional happenings occurring there. So a gay couple arrived to the same event and shouting "Hail Satan!" burned a Bible at this book burning, which I guess makes it.
No, no, no. Still shouldn't have done that.
Makes it. I don't know what it makes it.
Uh,
It's also quite bizarre.
I mean, they made their point, but what that point was is not exactly clear. Um,
Yeah,
mm,
yeah, exactly. Thank you for putting it so well. So yeah, these two things connected to destruction of books prompted us to talk about book burning in history of humanity, and we wanted to start with. I didn't open any links related to Sumeria.
I added them to the list. If you open the
Okay,
list,
you can. I guess you can start talking, and I will add the links.
yes. When I started thinking about it, as usual, my first question is, when did this all start? I mean, clearly there were no book burnings before there were books. But then what do we mean by books? Clearly, books didn't start the way they look now. So there were books before codices, there were scrolls, and going even further back, there were palm leaf manuscripts, there were bamboo strips, and then, of course, the earliest of them all, there were clay tablets
Yeah,
in Babylon, I mean, Iran, Iraq, that kind of area, and for a long time. And of course, the irony is that the earliest case of burning of a library that we know of actually preserved it for us.
yeah,
Here is one photo of how it was displayed at a recent exhibition devoted to Ashurbanipal, the famous Assyrian leader who lived in Nineveh and whose library was destroyed by enemy forces in something like 7th century BC. So by that time, obviously, their civilization was an ancient one and possessing great knowledge. And Ashurbanipal, in his palace in Nineveh, collected all sorts of material, ranging from historical records to economic records to literature. Some 14,000 documents were found in 1934, and we only have them because of that historical fire. Because obviously, if you fire clay, you get ceramics. And as anyone who's ever dug anything archaeologically will tell you, destroying ceramics is virtually impossible. Once it's broken, it stays there forever. So here, this display is also probably a representative of how they were displayed at the time, because from the way that they were found, we know that they were stored in layers, so probably on bookshelves. So something like this, almost 3,000 years ago, was a library that was deliberately burned by the enemies of this state and luckily preserved for us. And among the
well,
things,
it's an interesting idea to burn a clay tablet library.
yeah. Clearly, people didn't know what they were doing. So, if you show us the next,
Not very literate people, I guess.
yeah.
They did the
So,
burning.
if you show us the next link,
Yeah, just a moment.
I think you've already opened it. Yeah, here is one of the tablets preserved in this archive and available on the British Library, on the British Museum website, like most of that archive. This is the biggest uh, part of Gilgamesh still in existence, coming from that very library. Like so many of ancient classics, like Beowulf, say, it comes to us very fragmented from the, and you have to imagine that. I mean, if another shell fell a bit to the left and broke this tablet, we would have 15% less of the Epic of Gilgamesh. The same as with Beowulf, it's often said that it is one coffee cup away from oblivion. So we should be very grateful for those excavations and in the end for that fire. Okay, so this is, and there are a number of libraries like that preserved
And
from the ancient
what's this
world.
display?
This is also a display of Ashurbanipal library. If you go to the British Museum, this is how it is displayed in the permanent exhibition space.
The top shelf almost looks like a modern shelf.
I really like it. Yeah, yeah. By the way, here you can see some one of the most ancient maps. This is that circular thing in the middle, and a few mathematical treatises and whatnot. So lots of things were preserved in those libraries. But again, this is destruction of a library as a byproduct of war. So people didn't come to burn this library specifically. But the next event that is impossible not to mention is the burning of Alexandrian library.
Should we talk about it right now? Okay, let's talk about it right now. I'll add some more links. Yeah.
Okay.
I wouldn't stop you.
Yeah. So, as many of you probably know, the story is a bit murky. Some people say the library was never burnt; it was simply abandoned, because, of course, the greatest
Or it never
enemy.
existed.
Whoa! Because, of course, the greatest enemy of libraries is underfunding. So, especially in the ancient world, once you stop copying papyrus rolls, you no longer have a library. And this interesting document, which is not very well known.
Which one should I open?
Let's start from with the first one. Now, this is an interesting document coming from Alexandria, probably copied, if not by people in the who worked in the library, then certainly by someone who witnessed its final throes. So the Alexandrian library proper ceased to function something like the 3rd century AD. So it existed for 5 to 6 centuries from the Ptolemaic times into the early Christian times. Then a few military conflicts later, almost nothing of it was left. But then there was a sister library called Serapeum Library. So it was a temple to a Greco-Egyptian deity called Serapeum, and there was a library connected to it. And some books from the Alexandrian library were kept there. And when Alexandrian library ceased to exist, this library continued. But then in the late 4th century, I guess, a local bishop called Theophilus, and now you can show us the next image.
Yep.
Here he is in the bottom right, shown with what is actually a mummy of his predecessor. I really like this. This mummy is the only depiction of Bishop Timothy I of Alexandria. Well, better that than nothing at all. So this guy, and we are looking, by the way, at the 7th century manuscript. So it's a copy of a copy of a copy of an almost contemporary account of those events. So this guy decided that having a library containing pagan works in a building that used to be a pagan temple is somehow not very good for the morals of Christian population. So he enlisted the help of bearded monks. Now, monks in the 4th century, so very earliest monks, very, very severe people. So they mostly lived in the desert, ate crickets and shit, basically, and from time to time came to big cities to teach them what real Christianity is. And he enlisted help of those guys, and they came, and then if you watched the film Agora, you know what happened. So mathematician Hypatia and other nice people trying to save at least something of the classics of the ancient world, and bearded monks killing everyone and burning the library. This may or may not have happened, but certainly something did, because if you look at the next image of this Alexandrian World Chronic, now Theophilus is standing atop Serapeum, this last remnant of Alexandrian library, and in the bottom right there is a building which is also Serapeum, and in front of it there's a person standing like that. Can you see that? What they are doing is they are throwing stones at the building or at the librarians. We don't know that. So there was some kind of conflict. Was it burning? Was it not burning? Hard to say. But certainly not long after that, we no longer hear about any prominent people working in Alexandria. No more Galens, no more Euclids, no more any kind of scientist. So that was it, along with most of ancient knowledge. But but we have missed one earlier incident in another part of the world, which I think you're gonna tell us about.
Yeah, I wanted to talk. We wanted to move to China, but first there is a message from Liana Miranda. Hola, I guess that should be Spanish, but so more people join. No, not Spanish. Um, Rio de Janeiro, so it should be Portuguese. Sorry about this. And so we'll probably have somebody from Brazil joining our live stream. It starts to be a tradition. Somebody from Brazil joins us from time to time, and that's nice. Yeah, we wanted to move to China because obviously, as many things were invented in China, book burning also happened there quite early. And obviously they had books quite early, and I wanted to start with how the books looked like at the moment, because some sources say that paper was invented in China probably in the 1st century before the Common Era, maybe earlier, but currently the idea, the main thought, the how do you say, the consensus is that it happened in the 1st century before the Common Era. But there were books before, and here are some examples of these books or parts of the books or pages or something, and they were usually wooden or bamboo. Narrow wooden or bamboo planks. As far as I understand, they were twice the width of a chopstick or something like that, or in this area, and they were inscribed by hieroglyphs, of course. And here is a modern approach, a more modern approach to creating such a book, and you can see there are layers over layers of these bamboo sticks with inscriptions on them, and Here are some more examples with ancient Chinese hieroglyphs, and so it's pretty burnable. This material can definitely burn. I'm not sure if it burns better or worse compared to paper books, but it can definitely burn. And well, of course, there were some book burnings happening in the ancient China. There is a major trope about dedicated to burning of books and burying of scholars that happened in the 3rd century before the Common Era, and as far as I understand, there is the general idea is that burying of scholars probably didn't happen, but burning of books seems to have happened, and maybe even more than once in this location, and this is. Well, while we discussed the previous examples in Sumeria and Library of Alexandria, they were well, we don't know about Library of Alexandria, but with Sumeria it was a result of war actions. Here it's a result of ideological differences and philosophical differences. So. Some books weren't ideologically true enough or correct enough, and representatives of the Qin dynasty decided to remove them from circulation in a very radical way.
And a very effective way, we need to say, because
it's strange, because as far as I understand, some copies of the books were allowed to survive in royal libraries and some special collections. So they were destroyed by, but they still understood that preservations of knowledge and books is important. So yeah, it's interesting how it happened. But still, it's a major trope, and. Pavel specifically asked me to show you this map of China as it was at that moment.
And basically
200 years ago.
And basically every dot there is a small capital. So there was no unified China. There were no two Chinas, as there were at some moments in time. But there were many, many Chinese states. And every single ruler was expected to have some kind of bureaucracy and some kind of intellectual school preparing those bureaucrats.
And intellectuals, elites, I guess.
Yes.
Intelligentsia.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about that is when you don't have to stay in one place and be faithful to one person, when there is wiggle room in terms of what you can say, there is also a very fertile ground for new ideas. Some
heresy.
Some 100 philosophical schools are supposed to have originated in that period. Now, only 3 survived, basically. All the rest were destroyed during the event that you described, and it was destroyed really thoroughly, except for the quotes we have in the works of their enemies. We have hardly anything on any of them. Now and then, in some Chinese tomb, some heretical scroll or a page from a heretical book is found, but basically we have nothing about most of them. It really reminds me of what Christian authorities did in the early 5th century. We have books upon books describing hundreds of heresies, and we have nothing written by those people. So, to
add a bit, there were more stories like that throughout the Chinese history, and well, I am not specialist in Chinese history. Of course, I have to rely on source and I don't know, Wikipedia and stuff. But Wikipedia cites at least 5 occasions of similar book burnings and destruction of knowledge and attempts to limit the spread of some heretic or outlandish ideas. So yeah, that's something that repeated several times. Pavel, are you with us?
Yeah, I am. I'm a bit lost. Uh, whilst you were looking for those bamboo strips, coming back to those, are they contemporary to what we're talking about? Are those really bamboo strips from before the Common Era?
Uh, these ones, as far as I understand, may be because well, they were an illustration in ancient Chinese hieroglyphs, which are well. I think even the person who almost never saw any Chinese texts can differentiate between that can see that there is some difference here, and I'm not sure about these ones, and you can almost
Yeah.
you can almost see any details here. So anyway,
It's funny how you can write
this one is definitely a later
Yeah,
creation,
yeah.
and that's reconstruction. I think it was something like 18th century, 18th
Uh,
century edition of the Art of
Oh
War.
yeah, here it says those bamboo slips are from the 3rd century BC. It's funny how you can write on basically anything. Do you know what the oldest examples of Chinese characters are written on?
Uh, Stone? I don't know.
No, on bones.
Okay.
There is this wonderful word, scapulomancy. It means making prophecies by uh, uh, writing questions to gods on bones, and then poking them with a hot iron. And depending on how cracks go, the gods either approve of your request or disapprove of it. And we have an enormous archive, thousands upon thousands of documents of questions asked by the ruler and the answers given by the gods. So
Oh yeah,
everything,
yeah. Oh yeah. Now you reminded me. I remember this story. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So
Absolutely.
everything from whether you should go to war
Yeah.
to whether you should marry a nice lady from an opposing dynasty, to when will your damn teeth stop aching.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we know quite a lot about that. By the way, that whole archive burned too, and was only found in 19th century and long used as dragon bones for traditional Chinese medicine. Apparently good for your stomach and for your virility.
So here are some ancient examples, and I guess we will move forward in history to medieval times now, or something. What was your plan, Pavel?
I could start sharing and going
Okay.
through.
The last thing I wanted to share about the Chinese part of our today's talk is that while we were searching for some information, I stumbled upon an interesting illustration to Chinese paleography and the thing that's known as I will butcher the name definitely Qizhong discovery. And so a robber, a tomb robber in 279 Common Era. So 17 centuries ago, or something more than 17 centuries ago, stumbled upon a collection of books from the 4th and 3rd centuries before Common Era, while doing his job of robbing tombs. And that allowed to get some information on ancient books and ancient history over then. While in the modern European tradition, we have a lot of archaeologists moving around the world in the 19th century within different empires. I don't know, Russian empires, British empires, some other empires, and taking away stuff from different locations and then storing them for decades and maybe even a century or something like that. And then many decades later, people start finally working with these objects and finally get some information about book history and yeah, yeah. But
Well,
1700 years difference.
but then you notice the common theme: to, tomb robbers,
Yeah.
tomb raiders,
In both cases.
in both cases, and many, many more cases. So most of what we know about ancient scripts does come from tombs.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you are squeamish, don't go into paleography. I don't know. What's the moral there?
Yeah, so I should probably stop sharing and Pavel will start sharing.
Can I do that?
Just I need to stop first. And now you can move forward.
Can I?
Perfect.
So, okay. So,
That's one of the images we wanted to use for our thumbnail of for the preview of our live stream.
yeah, and it is also an image of one of the very few early Christian book burnings. I don't mean burnings of books by Christians, but Christians burning books. Almost certainly legendary, because it's impossible to imagine that Saint Paul, a leader of community of what, dozens of people, maybe 100, could came to a big bustling commercial city of Ephesus and just go and burn pagan books. Of course, this is not a contemporary depiction, and it is also not a very informed depiction. I mean, look at what he's burning. Saint Paul burning codices.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, maybe not.
Pretty unlikely.
Pagan codices at that. God, I wish had any. I wish we had any of those. So that idea that it was somehow okay to burn the books you don't like, it was very much a part of Roman and Middle Eastern mentality, and it somehow got in the New Testament in the Acts of the Apostles. Very much a literary work, not an account of what happened. And we only really get anything like actual book burnings by Christians much later. You know how it is. Good and taught morals. What is bad when people are beating you? What is good when you are beating people? So Christians learned nothing. The moment Emperor Constantine adopted Christianity for the Roman Empire and called for the first.
Well, that's a theme that will go through almost all the examples we will talk about in the future. People learn nothing, and when the power changes and shifts, new power starts burning books.
Yeah, and this is the example. The ecumenical council that was called by Constantine to settle a controversy, a so-called Arian controversy, a very fine and difficult to understand theological point, something about the nature of Jesus, how many Jesuses were there, 3, but how were they connected to each other? Nobody knew, but everybody had a strong opinion, and one of those opinions was held by Bishop Arian, you can see here, heretici Ariani damnati. So be damned Arian heretics, and burning of Arian books. Yet again, highly unlikely that those books look like that, because this image comes from a much later manuscript, not Italian, I think, something like 8th or 9th century, but it depicts something that actually happened. Eusebius, the first church historian, tells us in great detail and great delight how the work of Arian and his pupils was collected and burned wherever it was found.
By the
But
way, Pavel, you forgot to share the links, so I'm sharing them right now, and and I only caught up with the current topics. So if anybody is watching and waiting for the links, I will post them right now.
but again, this couldn't have looked like this, because the events are late fourth century, and pocket books of heretical works looking like that, mm, very unlikely. But still, something like that did happen. But you have to go quite a long way from here into the future to actually get public book burnings. They were not that popular in the Middle Ages, despite that this is what comes to mind when you think about book burnings. When did they burn books? In Middle Ages? Certainly no, they didn't. My personal hypothesis is that books were A, expensive, B, reusable. Why would you burn a good book if you could just scrape off the
Yeah,
text and write upon it?
before the introduction of paper, they were very reusable with vellum pages, and you can just scrape off the top layer and write something new over it, and that's quite amazing, by the way, because it allows modern scientists to read all these layers in palimpsests, and many thanks to these hateful medieval people for cleaning layers and layers of the text.
Yeah, I'm following the project at the monastery of Saint Catherine at Mount Sinai, now in Egypt. They have an extraordinary head librarian, Father Justin, the first American monk in almost 2,000 years of the monastery's history, and he's digitizing the whole collection using multispectral imaging. And this is basically the way to read the palimpsests. And by now they've found all sorts of things, pagan literature, scientific literature, the earliest example of a written Georgian, Caucasian Albanian manuscript, all sorts of stuff. So yes, yes,
I
great
can't stop
correction.
saying that my dream is to live to the time when all of these books are digitized, and also digitized with the multispectral. I always forget how it's called, multispectral
Multispectral imaging.
imaging. I always want to say scanning, but well, obviously multispectral spectrum imaging, because I'm sure we will find, well, they will find so much, so many interesting things there, and so many lost books there. So
And I also think it's worth repeating. The worst thing you can do is to stop copying books. If history teaches us anything, once you stop copying books, they will eventually disappear, because history tends to go to dark places every now and then. And when modern libraries just keep their books and don't scan them, they are basically failing to learn this basic lesson. So one of the functions of the library is to copy its books. Please do that. So anyway, uh, coming back to the Middle Ages, I'll show you basically all decent images of book burnings there are, and there aren't many. And they all come from later Middle Ages, so 13th century on. We'll start with this charming image. you can see they are not just burning books, they are also chopping them. And here is a saint.
And I think by the way
Yeah.
we mentioned book shopping in the previous live stream
By Mark Cockram himself.
and yeah, and also in the news section. So we mentioned it twice.
So here is one image of a particular event, a saint presiding over burning of books, nothing strange happening here. And here's another one of the same event, an almost contemporary depiction. This is a later one. So this scene comes from the times of the Albigensian Crusade. I don't know if you've heard about that. So at one point, Europeans understood that they don't stand too much of a chance in the Middle East, and why go all those thousands of miles if you can go and kill people in your midst, and also call it a crusade. So perhaps the most atrocious of those was a crusade against the Albigensians, a sect of a dualistic nature, of uncertain genesis, because it has some ideas that link it to the Gnostic ideas of to pre-Christian ideas, to Zoroastrian ideas. So it's on this Eurasian continuum of religions with a Christian flavor, and also folk religion. It started as beliefs of peasants and evolved into a whole sect with its own bishops and prophets and everything. And they were all killed. All of their books were burnt. Virtually nothing survives, but you can still go and see a few frescoes in southern France, and you can see how this was glorified, because, as you can see, everything is just fine. Yes, saints are burning books. So this is 13th century. Another example.
When beheadings were public entertainment, why do we care about books? Besides the fact that they're expensive.
Here's another example, also from France, also from a persecution of a sect. Of this one, I know very little. It's Turlepin. How do you even pronounce that? It's something like a Beguine movement. So much of it was led by women. It's also mm, it was more of a spiritual practice with something that could be perceived as magic, but they also have their own scripture, which is unusual for a sect at the time. Usually, most of the Christian sects of the Middle Ages, they followed the same scripture, but they only interpreted it differently. But in this case, they even had their own scripture, their own New Testament. I also wanted to show you where this particular image comes from. So you'd think this was a rather chilling depiction, so it was meant to shock, but clearly not, because it comes from this chronicle of Charles V of France. Here it is on the bottom, and on the top of the very same page, we have a queen giving birth. I mean, so basically, it's like the news of the day. My wife got my wife my son was born, then I burnt a few books. So that kind of vibe I'm getting from it. Again, France, for some reason, in the Middle Ages, French were the people to go to if you want to burn some books. So if you're into that kind of thing, go to the French. I think this is French too, and a bit later example. again dealing with heresies. And again, you see, they're
Yeah, I
not.
think it was French. I also checked this manuscript
Yeah,
and
yeah,
this
yeah.
illustration earlier.
Uh, it is an illustration for a book of Maccabees, so it's supposed to illustrate ancient Jewish history, but the clothing and the date are very suspicious because this is the time that Reformation started, and this is when Counter-Reformation started to burn the books. Yeah, so again, I like how in almost all these examples, they don't just burn the books, they also stab them. They It's a form of execution. I don't think this is how modern book burnings work, because uh, in modern times, people aren't trying to destroy the books; they're trying to destroy the ideas. It's more of an act because obviously you can find all those ideas in other books, but you are sending a message. But in the Middle Ages, in the late Middle Ages, if you destroy the book, you destroy the ideas.
Well, you also need to create some sort of magical ritual around it, and yeah.
Uh, uh, this final pictorial example has no burning of books, but I like it so much that I wanted to show you anyway. This is an image by Sassetta of the burning of Jan Hus. Ah, no, 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 no. Uh, Here he is in the middle. We know his books were burnt too, but there are no depictions of that. He also is an example of this proto-Reformation fermentation inside the Catholic Church. Martin Luther didn't come out of nowhere. He in fact he quoted Jan Hus and Hussite works, and he also quoted uh, Jan Hus's teacher, who was also burnt and whose books were burnt in large quantities. But unlike books by Jan Hus, they also were copied so widely that most of his works survive. I, of course, mean John Wycliffe, whose book we mentioned on our podcast about the most expensive books. Here's a copy of his Bible, Wycliffe Bible, that sold for $1.5 million, and it and while over 200 of them survive, at least 10 times as many were burned at the time. So again, English Reformation also didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of people like that, whose books and whose ideas Catholic Church tried to destroy for ages and ages.
By the way, when did you want to show this graph you plotted? Is it now or later, or I'm
Yeah,
spoiling something? What?
yeah, right now. So our starting point for research into this topic was a couple of wonderful Wikipedia pages. Somebody knows what they're doing. So one of them is called, where is it? List of book burning incidents, which is a never-ending list. And you know how they write on Wikipedia. This is not a complete list. You can help Wikipedia by expanding it. And they keep expanding it. Every few years, there's something to add. But this page is a bit difficult to analyze. There are lots and lots and lots of events. There is, however, a better starting point, which is list of destroyed libraries. And it starts with the example that we just talked about, destruction of the Chinese scholars and Chinese books, Library of Alexandria, Library of Serapeum. and then it goes through the Middle Ages and into the present. So since this one has a city name and a date, it was easy actually to plot it. So I went to Google Sheets and made this little map. Colors represent dates. So what do we see? We see that wherever there were books, there were book burnings. And I only included libraries that were destroyed by humans on purpose. So color on this
Yeah, and
map.
there are many libraries about which we do not really know what was
Yeah,
the reason
yeah.
of the destruction. There was a huge fire in Moscow several years ago in one of the research institutes, and they held an amazing collection of all sorts of books, and we still do not know if this library was burned by any how do you call it?
On
If it was
on
planned
purpose.
for further development of the area, because some construction was made after that, so they built some high-rise buildings there or something like that in the same place. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah. So since the color represents the date, we can also see a few patterns, I think. So the newest ones are the greenest ones.
Yeah, and here is the one, by the way, Moscow 2015.
That's the one, yeah. uh, what's that? But anyway, the green ones we're gonna get to a bit later, but these yellow ones are the Middle Ages. So the yellow ones are circa year 1000, and the somewhat greener ones, this one, like this one, are around 12th century. And this is, as you can clearly see, all Arab world. Well,
Mhm.
certainly Muslim world at the time. And while the Muslims themselves have burnt a number of libraries when they were expanding, they also presided over a renaissance of scientific knowledge and renaissance of libraries. Uh, After all, most of what we have from the Greco-Roman world doesn't come to us directly from the Greeks. It comes to us, especially the scientific corpus. It comes to us via the Muslim countries, but it wasn't a peaceful time. Uh, uh, they they attacked each other. Obviously, there were two caliphs, and there could be only one caliph. You know, like Highlander stuff. And there were also Mongols. There were also Iranians. There were all sorts of people who didn't like the domination of the Arabs. And this is a whole line of libraries burnt at that time. If we go here, you can see where it was. It was in Cordoba, it was in Isfahan, it was in Tripoli, it was in Ghazna, it was in Nishapur. So all over that world, we see the destruction. And also we see destruction in North Africa. We see destruction in Eastern Europe and in Western Europe. So lots and lots of fires. But we also see, at slightly later time, burnt libraries in the New World, and those weren't European libraries. Those were the libraries of the Aztec and the Maya. Well, Mayan codices were destroyed by this charming fella. I mean, you can see he was a nice guy, right? Uh, his name was Diego de Landa, and he was the bishop of Mexico. And he decided that the best thing he could do to incorporate Mexico in the Spanish Empire was to destroy their history. There were thousands and thousands of manuscripts in pre-colonial Mexico.
And that's a step forward from the some of the previous examples and from the example of this Chinese book burning that we talked about in the beginning, because there was in ancient China there was they tried to stamp out some sort of ideology and philosophy. But here he tried to remove the whole history from the context and from the memory.
Yeah, and he didn't keep any of the books for himself. I mean, what he did, interestingly,
but then that's something that starts to repeat again and again in the future after this moment.
Yeah. He did record the information he was interested in. So he had access to all sorts of books, and he wrote his own book describing the alphabet, describing some facts about the history. But this is it. Then he destroyed all the books that he used. Of all the Maya codices, we only have 3 pre-Columbian books. I mean, just 3 Maya codices survive from before conquest. I don't know. How he could do that, I have no idea. Here's a wonderful example. This is a book, and imagine there were thousands upon thousands of these. But
by the way,
actually,
do you know which material they used for the pages?
I should have looked it up.
Sorry.
I thought about it. We should ask someone who knows.
Yeah, maybe that's a good topic for one of the future podcast episodes.
And by the way, this book by the book burner actually helped to decode the writing quite a bit. So yeah, as you probably know, Soviet scholars took a big part in that project, and they largely started from the book of this bishop, whom I will no longer name, and not just because I don't remember his name, but because I don't like him. So the same story, well, sort of similar, happened to Aztec codices. There were also thousands of those. We have a few more than from the Aztecs than we have from the Maya. We have also just 3 pre-Columbian ones, but quite a few written just after. And while they do sort of reflect imperial and colonial outlook, they also record local histories, local knowledge, local literature, etc. But again, many of them were burned. Here's, by the way, an example of post-colonial manuscript that is written in Latin letters, but in Aztec language. Here's an example of an illustration from one of the codices, but again, they were burned, they were ignored, they weren't copied, they weren't stored right, and most of what survives in European libraries and not in America. So this is that part of the map. And now we are moving into the more modern times, and I wanted to give this curious example. Now we won't from here on we won't move chronologically, because things start happening all over the place. So one curious example from 18th century that I found comes from Jewish community of the German lands of Austro-Hungarian empires. So when was it? In 1790s, I think, 1780s and 1790s, Austro-Hungarian Empire became made a first step towards incorporation of Jews into their societies. The famous Toleration Edict was issued, and the idea was if the Jews go to Austrian schools and get secular education, they can keep their religion and they can go to universities. This is, for example, how the father was the grandfather of composer Mendelssohn, the famous philosopher Mendelssohn was educated. He was the product of that milieu, but it wasn't without controversy, because as you can imagine, for education is foreign education is the easiest way to lose your own culture, and Jews are very much aware of that. So when this gentleman, Naftali Hirsch-Wesley, wrote an enthusiastic book about this edict and what it gives, it says it's called Words of Peace and Truth. So they were perhaps his idea of peace and truth, but the effect was quite opposite. All over Western Europe, Orthodox Jews, and there were basically no other kind, started protesting and even burning his books. And in a rather chilling foreshadowing, the Vilnius ghetto hosted a burning of Jewish books for the first, but certainly not last time, in the 1790s. And by that time, Jews should have known better. By that time, they themselves and their books have been burned for thousands of years. Bible records, the Torah and newer historical books that are now part of Old Testament, they record events in 5th century BC, in 3rd century BC, in 2nd century AD, of burning of Jewish books that were always followed by burning of Jewish people. As Henry Heine said in 1840s, where they burn books, they will eventually burn people, and that is certainly what happened in Europe. One interesting example of a book of a Jewish book that survived more than one burning is this Sarajevo Haggadah. It's called Sarajevo Haggadah because it's now kept in the library of Sarajevo. And when you hear that word, you know that nothing good will follow. The book started its history in Spain in the 15th century, shortly before the Jews were expelled by the Edict of 1492. It traveled to Germany, then to Italy, and eventually settled in what was then Serbia, I think. I'm not sure. It's now in Sarajevo. And during the first of all, during the Second World War, it was listed specifically by the Germans as a book to be burned, but librarians managed to smuggled it out of the city. It was then returned, and then in 1992, the library was again attacked with direct aim to destroy its treasures. The only people who knew where Haggadah itself was hidden were the director of the library and director of the manuscript reading room, but they both fled the encroaching army. And one of the librarians, risking his life, came back and searched everywhere he could, and finally found it in a toilet, hidden inside a tank. So this is an amazing survival, and it tells us of three different attempts to destroy it. Then another story of perhaps a more optimistic one, but also starting with ghettos, is the story of the Vilnius ghetto in the Second World War. At first, it's a strange story. So at first, when the Germans took Vilnius and realized they have a big Jewish population on their hand, they decided to create a Jewish institute of sorts to record the history, the language, which was Yiddish, and the traditions of the Litvak Jews, because at that time they thought they were gonna rule them. So in order to rule a nation, you first need to study it. That was the idea. And it sounds really strange to me. Germans appointed the foremost Jewish scholars to collect and edit and publish the history of the Vilnius community of Jews. Of course, it didn't end well. At some point, all the Jews were confined to the ghetto, and it became clear that the books weren't gonna survive. Librarians, the so-called paper brigade, and they were at first they were mostly Jewish, then they were all replaced by the local librarians. The most famous of them is Antanatas Lupis. Here are some of the people of the time. Here it is, Yiddish Scientific Institute. And here's the process of sorting of the books and selecting the most precious ones. And during that sorting, librarians selected the books that they somehow managed to transport it out of this center and into a nearby church and hide it underneath it. So after the liberation, here it is, after the liberation of the ghetto, the books were found, at least most of them, but then an even stranger thing happened.
I wouldn't say it's stranger, because it sort of works well with the traditions of the country you're going to mention, I guess.
Yeah. So we are talking about Soviet Union, right? Because Vilnius became part of Soviet Union, and on one hand, Soviet Union condemned destruction of the Jews and their culture. On the other hand, they wanted to have nothing to do with it. So they decided that these unique archives were not worth preserving, and they ordered the destruction of most of this literature. Fortunately, the head librarian at the time managed to hide most of these books again in a church and he kept the secret until he died in the 80s. He didn't see the collapse of the Soviet Union, but his friends did. And in the 90s, those books were mostly transferred out of Vilnius. They are now in all over the world. They are scanned.
Which is a bit upsetting, but well.
Well, yes, and even more recently, some percentage of those books were found in a hidden chamber somewhere underneath a church again. So they hid their books really well. And considering how many books there were, I mean, how do you hide 100,000 books so that they are not found for 70 years? That's impressive. And nowadays, the whole of the archive is available online. You can find, you can go to the YIVO Institute and find everything that was preserved. Perhaps you can talk for a bit about what happened in the Second World War, because my voice.
We will need to switch, I guess.
Yeah. Okay.
Just give me a moment, and I'll ask you to switch off the.
Yep.
And I will have to prepare as well. So, yeah. In general, not a very happy topic to discuss. I'm not sure if there are any happy parts of these book burnings. Just to bring some positivity, I guess, to this dark theme. When I published how do you say, the announcement of our discussion. What's happening here? I got some comments, and some people answered me that well, when we graduated our school, we had a bonfire, and some students decided to burn some of their of workbooks or tutorials or something. And while still, I don't think that. I wouldn't say that I don't think that burning books isn't okay, because I guess I also burned some useless books at my dacha during some cold days and nights, or just for kindling, because there are definitely some editions that aren't worth the paper they are printed on. And yeah, maybe I could have given them to recycling or something, but anyway, if you can burn newspapers, maybe you can burn some not really good books. But in my case, there was no bad intent toward the authors of the books or toward the spread of their ideas or something like that. And I guess in the case of these students, there also wasn't really bad intent towards the authors or towards these tutorials, just a way to commemorate the ending of this part of their lives, which is, well, making a bonfire in the situation like that sounds like something almost reasonable. Why everything isn't working for me? Somehow I cannot open the
tabs.
Yeah, I just cannot open Zoom, and so I cannot share the screen.
Well, they're doing
Oh,
well.
oh, yeah. No, you stopped. Okay, I see it here. That's my bad. Just give me a moment.
I can tell a family story in the meantime.
Yeah, I'm ready to switch, so we can talk about this part that I've been preparing, and then we'll return to your family story. Sorry.
Okay, yeah. Good.
Sorry.
Oh, this is Russian. Why are we looking at Russian text?
Well, why not?
Is this a Russian podcast?
Yeah, sure. I'm not sure even why I wanted to. Yeah, both texts are in Russian. Why I'm sharing the screen?
Hmm.
Okay, yeah, it's just late into the podcast and I'm losing my mind. So anyway, closer to my roots, I guess, because I already mentioned that I'm partially Romanian, and things related to Romanian history sometimes make a larger impression on me, and so that's why we wanted to discuss some of the examples of book burnings by Romanians, and there were, I guess, plenty of them throughout the 20th century. But I guess one of the most impressive book burnings happened during the occupation by the Romanian forces that were acting under the command from the Nazi Germany in 1941 and 1942 of the Bessarabia territories, of the territories of modern Moldova. And I know that's a touchy, that's a tough issue to discuss, because these territories moved between independency, being a Russian protectorate, or dependent territories being Romanian territories, or the territories from where the modern Romania was created. So it's really hard to talk about it. But anyway, when Romanian forces came to this part of Eastern Europe, they decided that they need to just to Romanize everything. And I should probably say that by that moment, in Bessarabia, in this Moldovan territory, they were under in the sphere of Russian influence for something like 150 years or so. And the main language for the bureaucracy and for the intelligentsia was Russian. There were Russian schools, there were Ukrainian schools there. There were, of course, Moldovan schools as well, but it was a polylinguistic area, and people spoke Romanian, Russian, and Ukrainian, and some other dialects as well. But when Romanian forces came there, they decided that they need to Romanize everything. They started Romanizing schools and limiting abilities to teach in Russian, Ukrainian languages, and also they started burning books. So it's let me check. I lost it again.
Something like 1 million books, I think.
So in Chisinau, there were burned 1,200,000 books. In Tiraspol, 250,000 books. In Belts, the Romanian forces burned 15 rail carriages of books. In other places, books were burned as well, whole libraries or separate collections. The How do you call пластинки? Граммофонные пластинки. The records, the
The
audio
music
records,
records, the big
music.
one.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
music records were burned or melted as well. So all the things that were related not to true Romanian language, even not. It was exactly Romanization, not priority of the Moldovan culture or anything, but Romanization, and a lot of books and other sorts of media were destroyed. And Yeah, and then in 1946, when the World War II has ended, there were other processes when they tried to burn books related to the first part of war when Romania was participating on the side of the Nazi Germany. So there were more book burnings after the war. So as we mentioned before, every new power that comes try to do some book burnings, and that's all in all that's a beautiful picture and a very sad part of the history of one of the countries I'm very tightly related to. Yeah. So
And
what's next? What's next on our itinerary?
I think we should mention the really curious. Can I share my screen now?
Yeah, just give me a moment to prepare. Yeah.
So when we speak about, where is it? Sorry. Yeah. When we speak about destroyed libraries, we absolutely must mention the case of the Leuven University Library. Now, it's the only library that I know of that was destroyed not once but twice in the 20th century. It was destroyed in the First World War, and just look what it was
And
like.
I should probably mention that Leuven is a city in Belgium.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, yeah. It's a Belgian city with a 15th century university in it. It's home to one of the, still even after two burnings, one of the greatest libraries of Europe. And here's what it looked like in 1914, just months before this happened to it. Then it was and it was a typical act of violence for violence sake. The Germans did it because they wanted to break the morals. They wanted to show that they can do that. There was no particular hatred towards Belgians. I don't know if anyone hates Belgians, not even Germans do. Belgians are nice people, but war is war, I guess, and this is what happened. And the whole world uh, collected money for the rebuilding of this library. I found some information that Russia sent some funds, even though Russia had its own woes in 1914 and later, and Soviet Russia sent some money, Americans from all over the world, and it was rebuilt. Uh, oh, sorry, I had a photo of what happened next. Well, but what happened next was basically the same thing that happened before. So in 1942, the library was destroyed again by the Germans, and this time America was the most outraged nation about that. And Americans, both private citizens and the state itself, sent considerable funds towards the rebuilding of the library. Mm. And when it was rebuilt, there was a great sign on it saying that it was rebuilt on using American money, and it commemorates all the evil things or something like that that the Germans did during the war. But it was rebuilt in something like the 70s when the European Union was about to kickstart. So criticizing Germans wasn't very politically correct, and that inscription was removed by the Belgians. Then Americans were outraged. The inscription came back, but was hidden somewhere, and you can apparently still find it. But another interesting story that I dug up today is lots of American journalists visited the city after the library was burnt and when it was being restored. their accounts was what fired up Americans to fund the rebuilding. And one of the journalists collected a page of a letter from the ruins of a library, and many years later donated to a library in Worcester, Massachusetts. And it was long forgotten about, and only this year, I think, no, last year, oh God, it's 2022 already. Uh, 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 who was here? I think an intern at the library was cataloging an old bookcase and found this letter, and now there will be an exhibition devoted to it in Leuven because it's coming back home. So the story,
And I'm sure some people will see this photo and will say, "Why isn't he using gloves?" And for that, we will ask you to watch one of the recent videos on our YouTube channel where we discuss why you probably shouldn't always use gloves, and you should probably use gloves only in some specific situations and working with some specific materials.
what you should do is you should ask a librarian before
Or
touching any
or
documents.
yeah, or a person who's working in conservation.
Uh, I don't know. I think it's enough of sadness for today. I have quite a few other examples, but maybe just one recent video. I I don't know. I have this strange feeling when I watch how people burn books. Uh, I don't think I've seen it for a while. This is an example from Azerbaijan. Uh,
And a very recent example.
And a very recent one at that, I think something like 2013. So the story is one of the classics of Azerbaijani literature wrote a book about the Armenian genocide. So people weren't too happy about that. And they collected all his books
Yeah,
from all the
they decided that burning only this particular book isn't enough, and they need to sort of have a ritual of destruction of the whole heritage of this author, and um, yeah.
I like how
I think if they had swords or something like that, they would have pierced these books as well as these people on the medieval illustrations.
it's a communal activity. Bring your child to work day, that kind of thing. And they're adding more and more and more. And here's the portrait of the author burning too. As you can imagine, he started getting, he can't go home. He can't go anywhere near Azerbaijan by now. And look at that. And this is still happening. And the family photo. I don't know. That shouldn't be happening, and yet it still does. People aren't learning lessons at all. And after the 20th century has given us so many of those, I don't know.
Yeah,
That makes me
yeah,
sad.
and
Can I stop sharing the screen?
I probably should say that you stop sharing the screen. Yes, you stop sharing the screen. I probably should say that while we have mentioned some of the book burnings made by Germans in the 20th century, there obviously were some hallmark, I'd say, book burnings there during the time of Nazi Germany, and I guess that's something that people usually know about when you start talking about book burnings. For many people, it's sort of one of the first things that comes to mind. I think so. Maybe that's my bias. I don't know. So we would probably not go into this theme in detail, but you had a personal story you wanted to share, if you still want to share it.
Mm, yeah, perhaps.
Because I think it's an interesting illustration, and we can finish our set talk with it. And
uh, you see, no, when we just watched this video, I noticed kids around, and a very similar thing, but a much more mundane one happened to my father when he was a child. He often went to visit his mother at her work because she worked as a librarian at his school. So in the 60s and early 70s, he often helped her with her librarian duties. And one of those duties was burning books, because all schools received instructions to remove certain titles from their collections. And mind you, you couldn't just throw them away, because then somebody could pick them up and keep them at their home. And if it was found there, a, a banned book that was ordered to be destroyed. So that could be awful. Even worse would be if you take a book home. Imagine that.
and somebody sees it
Yeah, yeah.
and tells on you, and
And so a librarian and her teenage son were burning books on a school's backyard.
and
This
that's
is
something that happened throughout the Soviet Union. So it's not like your grandmother was the only person who had
yeah.
to do this and who did it.
Imagine thousands and thousands of librarians burning books
Yeah,
all over the country.
on a regular basis.
And it was just a part of life. When I asked my grandmother about that, she shrugged. Well, that's what you did.
That's part of your work. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what librarians did, among other things. They
I,
burned
I
books.
I have this illustration posted on iBookBinding on our website several years ago that shows an instruction that when the how do you call it, large Soviet encyclopedia was published, and that's an encyclopedia with lots and lots of volumes. And when there was in after Stalin died in 1953, several years later, there were a lot of corrections that had to be made to the previous editions of the books. And sometimes volumes of encyclopedias or some other books came with lists of corrections, inviting users and owners of the books to cut out some specific articles from the encyclopedia because they were outdated. So some people did that. Some people kept the pages and articles knowing that they do that on their own risk. And anyway, these book burnings happened not only in 1960s, like with the example of your grandmother. That's something that happened throughout the Soviets. I don't know about later Soviet history, but throughout the earlier Soviet history as well, there are some memories of people who found their own books being on the lists for burning, and yeah.
No, well, actually, Russia has a great history of book burning.
We're starting measuring, whose history of book burning is greater. Make book burning great again. And now we return to United States.
There is a great legend in Siberia that when Peter the Great burned the Old Believers' books, there were 650 poods, which is 6.5 tons of book clasps left. And it reminds me of another metaphor from the Spanish burnings in Mexico.
Yeah.
That so many books were thrown into the river that it got black with ink. I don't like people in power. This is what I'm saying. Don't, don't, no, no,
No,
no,
don't
no,
like.
no, don't like, not at all.
Yeah, people in power in general, and people in well, in different positions of authority and power who think that their power allows them to do something strange things. Well, anyway, it's too vague, I guess. What I said just now. So I see that there are some people who stayed with us for the whole live stream. Dave Turnbull just left a comment there that I think every country has had periods of book burning in their history, and I already replied to him there that I think that probably many countries, especially the countries that had some imperial ambitions in their history, took part in some book burnings from time to time, and well, yeah, that's part of our history, and I hope that at some moment we will finally start learning from our history and not repeating this mistake, but it definitely isn't happening as of now.
Or anytime soon.
Yeah, sadly. So again, many thanks to all the viewers who stayed with us for all this time. There are several of them. Many thanks to anyone who will watch this video in the future. I hope we gave you a bit of additional perspective on the topic that book burnings weren't happening only in the Nazi Germany or modern United States. Book burnings weren't only related to burning Jewish books. Book burnings weren't really always related to attempts of trying to erase history of some nation of people or to being part of genocide or something like that. Sometimes they had some other reasons. I do not say that these reasons were better or that they were good, but there were some different reasons for book burnings and burning of libraries, and yeah, I hope we won't return to this topic anytime soon. We need something positive for our next live stream. So again, as usual, Violeta Liska says thank you again for staying with us. And we are returning with our live stream in 2 weeks' time. Next week we are recording a new podcast episode that will be aired later this year. So we are returning to our bi-weekly schedule as before because we are a bit tired of this 3 weeks of live streams in a row. I think in 2 weeks' time we will be streaming in the. We have a guest from the United States, so we are recording in the. No, next week. I think in 2 weeks' time we will. I don't know when we'll be live streaming in the morning or in the evening. We'll decide on it later because there were 3 evening live streams in a row due to all the sorts of different reasons. Again, please like, subscribe, share, ring the bell on our YouTube channel so that you can get updates about our live streams and podcasts. Please consider becoming a patron on Patreon. You will find the link below, or buying some tools from our web shop at store.iBookBinding.com, where you can add some tips. And see you next time. Many thanks for staying with us and watching our videos. Bye. Thank you, Pavel, for all the preparation. I did much less work this time. And as usual, I will stop streaming and we will wait for a minute or so before the stream stops in real time. So Dave Turnbull says, thanks guys for a very educational chat. Thank you once again, Dave.
And we didn't talk about Bard's Book Festival.
Yeah. Maybe we can talk about it separately. It's a historical.
But yeah,